This is a dangerous escalation with NATO head leaders. See, France, Britain, and America, in particular, America is the world's sole superpower, and France and Britain, as the European alliance, is as permanent members of the three members of the United Nations. The one that control the Western-led order is America, Britain, and France. They control the world base rules when it comes to the Western world order. So it's dangerous in this particular war in Ukraine for these three particular members that through them the norms are set not only in America but throughout Western Europe. And between these, like I said, these permanent members, they have a monopoly on the world stage. They got veto power against China and Russia, as China and Russia are also the two permanent members. So between France, or excuse me, between the superpower of America, may I say the world's sole superpower, and Britain and France, which are submissive to Washington's foreign affairs, they have set the norms for the Western-led order globally. So when you have three permanent members leading head first into a war with Russia with long-range attack or long-range storm shadow missiles, or in other words, when these three members that are the most powerful European members within the alliance of NATO, and they launching head first long-range missiles into Russia, and somehow this won't escalate and get out of control with a nuclear destructive war for all nations on Earth, is appalling. This is not like a war, normal war in a third world nation that you can overthrow the government and occupy the territory. This is not like a war in a poor, impoverished third world region of a third world nation. Y'all facing down a country that has over. Russia has the most nuclear stockpiles on Earth, even more than America, by a couple hundred, or not a couple hundred, but like just a little bit more than America. Russia has the most stockpiled nuclear weapons on Earth. And for y'all leaders, you know, we got rid of Biden, not because he lost the CNN debate with his dementia and Alzheimer's freezing on front of the camera. It wasn't that because of that debate that we got rid of him. We got rid of him because he was a danger to society on the world stage as a warlord, leading the world into a point of no return. And unfortunately, it's leaders that think that he's correct, like leaders in Europe that think that this is a good idea to launch long-range missiles by these three permanent members, not only in the United Nations, but the leaders of the European Union, because the rest of the European members have to obey these supreme rulers of the global order, meaning America as a world sole superpower, and Britain and France. It goes down in that order as far as authority. And these three musketeers, if you will. You got America as a that wants to be a hegemonic, undisputed world sole superpower. Then you got Britain beneath it. Then you got France, and that makes up the three member status in order of authority. And they think Britain's Prime Minister, France, Macron, they think it's a good idea to follow a senile bastard with launching missiles deep into Russia. And this is not like a third world war. This is not like Iraq or Afghanistan that y'all can warmonger and y'all have all the time in the world to occupy and y'all don't think nothing of the war because they barely have weapons or armies to stand on. This is not a piece of a walk in the park. This is not a piece of cake that y'all can have your cake and eat it too in this particular conflict. This is a cake with candles that are nuclear candles that when y'all blow those candles out, they blow up in your face as mushrooms. So this is not a game that you can sit down at the table and have your cake and eat it too. This is not a one-way street, a one-way road that y'all can attack as them, but they can't attack if you. Y'all can't hide behind Lazinski and say disclaimers. Oh, this is Lazinski's war. We just giving him the weapons. He can do whatever what he wants. That's up to him. This is not like a pharmaceutical commercial that at the end you gotta speak real quick and rapidly with disclaimers. Well, sometimes the cure of the medicine is more deadlier than the disease. This is not that type of remedy commercial that y'all can at the end of the commercial just talk real fast in the hopes that y'all can flood disclaimers and get yourself off the hook. This isn't exactly that the medicine is worse than the cure. So for y'all strategists, between y'all 3 permanent members, y'all ones that call the shots, y'all the shot callers of NATO, ain't y'all? America is a world hegemonic, neocon, central hegemonic, world so superpower. America leads everything when it comes to foreign affairs, when it comes to America's relationship with the NATO alliance and the European members. But beneath America, you got Britain. Beneath Britain, you got France. And they have a monopolistic power in the United Nations. They're the ones that created this world order after World War II, the Allies. And they propped themselves up as a monopolistical veto power within the United Nations when they created the United Nations from the League of Nations. So they set the rules in Europe and in America. But it's all in America's asymmetrical dominance as a world hegemonic power. Britain is not in a position to question America's authority because Britain barely has an army. They have a little island. Their kingdom done collapse. The sun sets on Britain nowadays, or the United Kingdom. You know, the sun sets on it. It's not like they cover all parts of the world with their crown like they used to at the height of their empire. France also is limited. So they go along for the ride of America's foreign affairs. Because America is at the top of the world as an asymmetrical hegemonic power that they think that they are destined to rule the world with pagan Washington monuments of the Constitution that they think that has manifest destiny over the rest of the world, which is a delusion. When it comes to fair democracy globally of sovereign nations, they shouldn't be all imprisoned to this pagan belief of Washington. When it comes to the global stage, every nation has their own dreams and pursuits of happiness and liberties, of sovereign pursuits that belong to their sovereign nations, free from a pagan George Washington or the manifest destiny that this politicians in Washington and bipartisanly thinks that they have to inflict on the world. That somehow divine providence of George Washington, pagan politics, should rule over the world, which is a delusion within itself. When America tries to emulate the Roman Empire, when they got senators like Mitch McConnell wearing 3-piece cheap suit togas as lifelong senators. Mitch McConnell's the longest senator, by the way. So he's been wearing cheap 3-piece suits as togas, roaming around in the American United States Senate, thinking that all roads lead back to Rome, or may I say the United States Senate. So this is a weird experiment in my book. The way I perceive it is trying to emulate things, whether it be George Washingtonian paganism with the Monument of Washington in Capitol Hill, whether it be us trying to emulate the Roman Empire with our Senate and the Senate building, how we architected to emulate Rome, whether it be this 3 monopolistical power, hegemonic bottleneck in the United Nations, Permanent Council, America, Britain, and France. And now we're playing a dangerous game. That these 3 permanent members think that this is a war that can be bluffed all the way to bank, the bank of nuclear destruction. And when they try to take their check to cash it, the check bounces as insufficient funds with mushrooms bouncing their checks. Because these three monopolistical Western hegemonic powers think that it's okay to launch missiles and run amok all over Russia. Not once has Putin been deranged enough to launch missiles into NATO. But since 3 years, America has given drones to Zelensky to launch countless of drones into Moscow. One night, Zelensky launched 140 drones into Moscow, thinking he was going to do like a little shock and awe, like Bush did in Baghdad. And America, at the beginning of this conflict, gave Zelensky missiles that Zelensky launched into the mainland of Russia to destroy gas refinery plants, to hit caches of arms in the mainland of Russia. So now these three members think it's a good idea to run amok all over Russia with long-range missiles. Now Putin used a mid-range ICBM with hypersonic nukes, hypersonic missiles that are capable of carrying nuclear material, and they're zapping down at hypersonic speeds that it kind of look like lasers, like thunderbolts. It kind of look real fast, these hypersonics, where they come straight down. And they're capable of decapitating the seat of governments. Let me make an analogy. Imagine if these hypersonic nukes come down in America and hits the White House, the Pentagon, the Capitol building. Hits the CIA, the FBI headquarters. Simultaneously. Imagine if there's no more Congress representatives, no more Senates, no more White House, no more presidents, no more Pentagon officials, no more generals, no more commanders. The seat of government is decapitated. And imagine if you synchronize this type of missiles demonstrations on France and Britain. So no more Downing Street, no more Buckingham Palace, no more military central command of in Britain. Imagine if France, Britain, and America, all of a sudden their decapitations happen synchronized at hypersonic speeds. So you decapitate the government of America, the leadership, the command and controls of their militaries. All their generals, the commanders, their headquarters are gone. All their experts are gone. All the politicians are gone. All the leaders of states are gone. What will happen if this happens synchronized simultaneously at the same time? Yes, of course it will be a breakout of World War III, but you start to get the dangerous games we're playing. Between America, Britain, and France, they launching missiles into Russia thinking that, no, they were never there. They were never there because Putin is afraid of NATO invading them. So let's provoke them and let's keep on going, crossing red lines because we perceive that Putin, it will never dare. See, the thing with JF Kennedy and Khrushchev, that they knew how to stare each other down and come back to reason. And they pulled back from the precipice of nuclear war. John F. Kennedy and Khrushchev, when they faced off in the Cuban Missile Crisis, they had enough common sense not to launch a bullet, let alone launch of missiles. They had common sense. At the day, they had common sense. At the end of the day, JFK and Khrushchev had common sense. They knew how to pull back from the precipice. But unfortunately, in mainstream news today, with the internets and all types of media corporations exacerbating punditries on both sides of the argument, leaders think that they have to act because the world will think of them as cowards. So they have to be more provocateurs. Whether it be Russia, Putin, in this war, whether it be instigators like France, Britain, like America, Britain, and France. So is it a good idea to try to run headfirst into a war that nobody will win, that all humanity will be almost extinct? Does that make good sense? Before y'all keep on racing head first towards each other. This is not like a regular war in a third world region. This is permanent members, nuclear armed members, attacking directly each other. You got the three permanent members, America, Britain, and France, in that order. You got America as a world sole superpower. Underneath it, you got Britain, and then you got France underneath that. And they control the NATO alliance. They control the world-based rules. And now they feel as leaders that they can go all the way head first with long-range attackers or shadows or whatever French calls their long-range missiles. And they want to just bombard Russia and think that this is a good idea. Well, we can antagonize them and scare them in the hopes that we can negotiate before Trump steps into office. Y'all think it's that easy? What if y'all miscalculate and Putin uses those hypersonic missiles to decapitate y'all heads of state, y'all heads of governments? Imagine if those missiles that he uses as an explanatory purpose, imagine if those missiles, like in America, imagine if the Pentagon, the White House, the Capitol building, the CIA headquarters, the FBI headquarters, imagine if those missiles rain down at hyperspeed, synchronized, and all your personnel are gone. There's no more Pentagon, there's no more generals, there's no more head of command, there's no more senators, there's no more congressmen, there's no more presidents, there's no more White House. Imagine if that's done to all your three governments. Of course, the rest of NATO will go to war. But you start to see what kind of conflict this will unravel. So does it make a good idea for y'all to toss long-range missiles and run amok all over Russia? Knowing that they're the number one nuclear armed nation. They got the most nuclear weapons, even more than America. Russia has. So what does it, are y'all dim-witted? On either side, whether it be Putin, Macron, Biden, or the Prime Minister of Britain, are y'all dim-witted? Don't you have no common sense to pull back with diplomacy? JFK and Khrushchev had common sense. Excuse me, not Khrushchev, Gorbachev. JFK and Gorbachev had common sense. Or Khrushchev. Sometimes I confuse the names. I apologize. But in the Cuban Missile Crisis, they knew how to pull back. They knew how to watch their steps. They knew how to be cautious. And is it because now we have the internet and you can log in and watch any media of any country talk shit with their pundits? That it wows your egotisms as sovereign leaders, that somehow y'all got a thing to prove your manhood on the world stage by dragging the world closer to destruction because y'all don't want to look weak in front of the worldwide medias, that anybody can access it through the worldwide internets. Y'all want to look like y'all bold heroes on the world stage, that when y'all look at the media outlets, y'all feel like y'all got something to prove of your manhood. The world can give a damn about your personality types. They can give a damn about your manhood. Biden, Macron, and Prime Minister of Britain, or Putin. The world can give a damn about your manhood, or your personality types, or your egotisms. The world wants to live in peace, while y'all world hawks are headed into nuclear destruction. Does that make sense? To be self-suicidal as leaders on the world stage, grandstanding with nuclear destruction. I think it's not a wise move for none of y'all to prove y'all manhoods in this type of issue. Because the one that'll pay the ultimate price is the destruction and annihilation of humanity. And for that reason, we can care less about your personality types, your insecurities, as individuals, or let alone your manhood or what y'all think you have to prove with each other. So, this bottleneck in the United Nations, this world hegemonic power of America's sole neocon, trickle down political power of wanting to be a sole world superpower. Beneath it is Britain and France, and they control the world order. Ever since the conclusion of World War II, America set the rules-based rules that under it, as allies, is Britain, and then France comes in third. And they are the bottleneck, the veto power that keeps the world ticking the Western lenient style. So they set the rules economically, diplomatically, they set the charters for the United Nations, and they don't allow no nations to be permanent members. They don't allow no nations to sit down as permanent members because they want to maintain their veto power, their monopoly on the world stage. And so now you got 3 permanent members directly attacking a 4th permanent member, which is Russia. And they're attacking each other directly. Or at least these 3 members are attacking Russia directly. Russia hasn't once attacked them or NATO. Not out of fear, but out of restraint. Out of patience and restraint. So I at least congratulate Putin up to this point for restraining himself to the fullest. Not out of fear, but out of caution. But don't take kindness for weakness. 3 members on the other side. America, Britain, and France. But it's dangerous on both sides what you're doing to each other. And see, even though Ukraine, Zelensky went viral with his cell phone, taking selfies of himself and doing short videos, and he captured the adornment of NATO leaders. And somehow y'all feel like you gotta go all the way to Armageddon in order to protect him and his movement. That y'all have to go to doomsday of world destruction just because y'all got carried away with his charismatic selfies and short videos that he recorded of himself on his cell phone. And somehow we have to defend him at all costs. But see, what I would tell y'all NATO members and the 3 monopolistical powers of the Western hegemonic rulers, may I say America as a world so indispensable world soul superpower with pagan Washingtonian beliefs on the world stage, along with their flunky, the bygone era of a kingdom of Britain, that now they're stuck in that little island. Even Ireland wants to annex themselves from the kingdom. So it's shriveled up. The United Kingdom is all stuck in that little island and it's shriveled up. Ireland and the Irish, they want to annex themselves from that crown. So, United Kingdom is not calling the shots in this movement. It's America as a world sole hegemonic power, neoconly. When America wants to control the world commerce through its currency as a hegemonic currency over the world stage, when politicians think that Washingtonian paganism means freedoms and liberties for all of mankind on earth with manifest destiny for Washington to inflict their foreign affairs on the rest of the world when it comes to policies, global policies. And France, is the third wheel in the bike. France is out of the 3 allies. France comes in third as a tag along, and so this is the 3 musketeers, if you will, the bottleneck powers on the world stage when it comes to permanent veto power in the Security Council, and they refuse to let any nations on earth be permanent members. Yeah, they invite third world nations to be temporary members with observer states, but America holds the veto power, and so the world keeps ticking hegemonically as a world sole hegemonic neocon power of Washington pagans. belief in manifest destiny. Somehow that man controls the liberties and democracies for all mankind throughout the globe of our planet, which is derangement for pagan politics in that mount that y'all call Washington. And they try to emulate Rome. America does on the world stage. But instead of wearing togas, they wear cheap three-piece suits like Mitch McConnell. So, where are we headed to? Is this like a battle royal that everybody jumps into the ring and everybody try to toss each other over the rope and the last man standing wins? Let me give you a snap back into reality. This battle warrior of nuclear destruction, if one man is standing, and that's the last man standing on Earth, nobody won. This is what you call a nuclear battle warrior on all sides. And the last man standing in the ring you think will be a winner? See? Khrushchev and JFK had the right diplomacy idea. They were cautious. They were wary of each other launching nuclear missiles at each other. So they held off. And they pulled back for common sense. But nowadays, like I said, I blame it on the internet. And now anybody can tune into every nation's outlets, of news outlets. So politicians have more news outlets to watch, more pundits to get under their skin. And they feel like as politicians, figureheads, they got something to prove on the world stage. Their manhoods, their legacies. They want to be able to write memoirs of themselves at their retirements of political careers, you know? Grandstanding on the world stage, trying to look like brave heroes. In reality, they're stupid individuals. Yeah, that's right. I call all of y'all stupid individuals. I call Biden, Macron, Prime Minister of Britain, Putin, all of y'all stupid individuals. They got something to prove on the world stage? And this battle warrior, nuclear battle warrior that y'all headed into? Y'all think that the last man in the ring wins? No. At the end of nuclear annihilation, there won't be nobody standing. Humanity will become extinct. The planet will be uninhabitable. So in this battle warrior, if y'all think you're going to be like heroes, think again. Go back to JFK and Khrushchev and realize that this is a fight that shouldn't be fought on both sides. You know, this is not like a third world nation that you could topple. You know, Ukraine is a non-nuclear armed nation, and at this point they're considered a third world nation. But who's fighting the fight? In reality, it's the three permanent members with the rest of NATO that are confronting a nuclear armed nation. So you got the three nuclear armed powers of the Western Alliance, America, Britain, and France, with the rest of NATO, and our allies globally, and we're trying to stare down Russia, the most nuclear armed nation on the planet. And somehow we think that we can bluff Putin all the way to the nuclear bank and cash hard checks of nuclear destruction, and thinking that our checks won't bounce for inefficient mushrooms when we try to cash in that nuclear destructive Armageddon check. And I'm an atheist, but I'm using that word as an analogy to show you that there won't be no man standing, and billions of humans will perish. So I can give I almost cursed. I can give a damn about your personality types. I can give a damn about your egotisms or your power trips as individuals. The rest of humanity could give a damn about y'all. We just want to live in peace. Now, before I end this video, America propped up itself as a hegemonic world sole superpower with this monopoly on the United Nations floors. America, between the 3 permanent members, America refuses to let every other nation on earth have their equal place at the table when it comes to the United Nations Security Council. Because America doesn't want to be displaced as a hegemonic world sole superpower. America doesn't want to lose its pristine veto power. America doesn't want to share it with the rest of the world and allow every member nation on earth to be permanent members of the Security Council. America wants to keep its monopoly as a bottleneck world hegemonic sole superpower with George Washingtonian manifest destiny, pagan belief, political pagan belief, that somehow we are destined to rule over the world with impunity, with manifest destiny, that somehow we're divinely paganistic or constitutionally wise under a pagan leader of George Washington politician beliefs on the global stage, and that every world is under the yoke of our whims, that every world is under the submissiveness of perpetual third world status, under the whims and control of this hegemonic world sole superpower, that we set the norms on the global stage. So America is the most undemocratic world on the world stage, if you ask me. America is the dictatorial ruler on the world stage to the rest of the nations on earth. America is enslaving the rest of the world's humanities and their sovereign countries. So ask me how corrupt do I see this monopoly in the United Nations? As permanent members, America wants to veto any nation under it, with impunity of paganisms of Washington monuments in Capitol Hill when they try to emulate the Roman Empire. That all foreign policies and all global reserve currencies and all roads lead back to Washington and their politicians. So is that fair and liberty for all of mankind or all of humankind? No, that's enslavement. That's oppression. That's suppression. That's one nation on earth subverting and enslaving the rest of the world to the whims of their political pagan beliefs. Constitutionally speaking, is undemocratic of a global system, is unbecoming of a global order. So America is the main culprit within the 3 permanent members keeping this hegemonic Western alliance going with impunity as a world sole superpower. Give me a second, my dog is making noise in the background. Bernie. So it's unbecoming of true freedoms and liberties for all of mankind in every country, of every nation throughout the world. This is a pure imperialistic, self-serving, self-grandizing American experiment on a global stage. And America refuses to step down and allow every nation to be permanent members, to have equal voting veto power when it comes to the world norms of world-based rules. Is that true freedoms for humankind throughout the planet? No. It's an imperialistic enslavement on serfdoms to the rest of humanity throughout the planet. When one nation has so much impunic power on the world stage that they have immunity to do and run amok of gluttony with impunity as asymmetrical hegemonic world soul superpower of an oligarchy, of a constitutional paganism under one man's delusions of righteousness when it comes to constitution, that they delusionally think that it's manifest destiny on earth to rule the world with impunity, like they have some divine providence to do that under a delusional constitution, under a belief of pagan political paganisms under George Washington. So it's a gluttony of greed and unjust monopoly on the world stage. And America is the one to be blamed solely for this. America is the one to be blamed because America wants to be the bottleneck that keeps the rest of the world from sitting at the table with equal rights and equal representations when it comes to all the issues that face the globe and every human being in this planet. Every nation should have the right to represent their populations in the world order. Every nation should have the right to have this same veto power or voting power when it comes to the security issues of the planet. Not one nation paganism of this Washingtonian politicians and Capitol Hill of Capitol Hill of this country of America. This has the right to bottleneck the rest of the world with impunity just because we're selfishly hogging the limelight as a world soul superpower hegemonically, neoconly, cunning every nation and subverting every nation just to do our bidding of our political selfish desires globally. As we braggadociously think that we are the indispensable soul world superpower. Some politicians are cunning themselves into believing their own propagandas bipartisanly in America, in Capitol Hill. So at the end of the road, what does America think it has to prove? When the world will turn against your world order, when the whole world will unite to displace you from that mighty throne that y'all think y'all have as the world soul superpower, the whole world would turn against your world order. And they would demand their freedoms and liberties and sovereignties of their countries and their populations of mankind or humankind, where all humanity yearns to be free from the enslavement of this Roman Empire that America tries to emulate in the 21st century. Y'all can't sit on those thrones as representatives in Washington, D.C. and think that y'all going to rule over the world with some type of delusional destiny inside your convoluted heads as y'all hypocritically take the oath to argue with each other like hypocrites and grandstand on the world stage while y'all think y'all have the world in the palm of your hands. Of course, the whole world would turn against this hegemonic soul world superpower that tries to enslave the rest of the countries on earth to the whims and the yoke of politicians that are delusional, arguing on both sides of the aisle bipartisanly as hypocrites within the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States of America. Yes, the world is changing, and y'all will have to learn to adapt. Get along where y'all fit along, where y'all get along where y'all fit. Every table, every nation will sit at that table. Every nation and their peoples will be represented equally in that table that y'all call the United Nations Permanent Council. Every nation has the right to defend their national interests and have their equal votes when it comes to global world-based rules and the norms of international law. Who is America to think that what they can impede the rest of the world from being equal and sovereign when it comes to the security of this planet and everything in it? When it comes to the League of All Nations, to be seated equally at that table that y'all call the United Nations. Who America thinks they are to imprison the rest of the world and subvert the rest of the world from sitting at that table and being equal and sovereign? Yes, the world order is changing, Washingtonians. The world order is changing whether y'all like it or not. And y'all have the slightest powers to keep it from changing. The world is evolving and every nation in it wants their equal representation, their sovereign rights, their freedoms, their liberties. They care not to listen to hypocritical pagan Washingtonian Constitution delusions of hypocrite politicians that take the hypocritical oath to argue with each other, grandstanding on the world stage as the greatest hypocrites that ever stood in politics. I think y'all have a power of, like a godly power to rule over the world and enslave every human being in the world to y'all constitution? To y'all standing on the grand stage of the world and thinking that y'all can't let the rest of the nations to sit down at that permanent table and have their sovereign rights heard and voted upon equally by all nations on earth to be considered equal, and their sovereign populations to defend themselves internally, and their rights on the global stage to be heard equally and fairly, and for all nations to vote their consciousness equally on earth before they decide to implement global-based rules, international laws. Who is America to enslave the rest of the world imperially? So yes, America's days are numbered as a hegemonic power, a world soul superpower. Those days and those ambitions are coming to an end. Even the European Alliance wants to charter their own path away from this derangement of Washingtonian pagans, because it's not fair for their regions or their countries. So yes, America stands alone as the most gluttony, greed for power nation on earth. And the world is changing. Whether y'all like it or not, y'all gotta make room at that table for the rest of the nations on earth. So I would tell this hegemonic world soul superpower that's trying to emulate the Roman Empire with toga-wearing three-piece cheap suits like Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer, when you try to emulate Rome on the world stage, when you call yourselves senators grandstanding with Washington paganisms of Constitution derangements, political pagans under one deranged leader of manifest destiny that y'all think that y'all destined to rule over the world as a world soul superpower, the indispensable world soul superpower. That y'all thinking is a given to rule over the world. When one nation is united to rule over the rest of the world and every nation in it. I thought the United Nations were united together as a United Nations, not one nation ruling over every other nation on earth. I thought it was a system of United Nations, not one nation ruling over the rest of the world with impunity, as the United States does. One country ruling over the rest of the world with hegemonic world soul super status that doesn't want to let the rest of the world sit at the table as permanent members of the Security Council because they don't want to give up their monopoly. It's too enticing. Absolute power is absolute corruption on the world stage. As Senator toga-wearing Romans, Washingtonians, emulating Rome and Roman empires on a grand stage of the 21st century that we call America, the United States of America. So you got one country united, meaning the United States, trying to rule over the rest of the world with impunity. And they refuse to let nations sit at the table to make up the world-based rules, to deal with the national security interests of global issues, to let every nation charter their paths by having equal rights and voting powers as permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations. So you got one nation, America, imprisoning the rest of the world, North America, the United States, imprisoning the rest of the world to their version of the Roman Empire. Right, senators, bipartisan in Washington? Or am I being delusional by observing this as a bystander, as an observer, as one human being looking at this corrupt system from the inside out? See, that body of the League of Nations was reformed into the United Nations, that every nation has their right at that table. This is not a monopoly. This is not one nation overall. This is not an imperial pagan constitution inflicting the rest of the world under their yoke. This is not the United States united to govern all nations on earth. No, this is the United Nations, and they all deserve their place at the table. Who is America's vanity to think that they can prop themselves up as a world so super hegemonic neocon power? To think that they can rule with impunity the global order. Even our allies are trapped under the yoke of enslavement of this derangement of Washington, D.C. within the United Nations. Even our allies. Even Britain and France have to go along for the ride. They've been going along for the ride under captivity in this United Nations order ever since the end of World War II. Britain and France wasn't in no position to govern the world order when America bombarded Japan with 2 nuclear weapons and America grandstanded with Harry Truman showboating Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Showboating to the world that America is the world's sole superpower. You think France and Britain was in any position to argue with America when America set up the United Nations from the League of Nations? You think that Britain and France they had negotiating powers with the derangement of megalomaniac of America's ambition to rule over the world as a sole power, a sole world superpower? You think Britain and France had any leverage to be considered equal? No, they tag-alongs. To this very day, Britain and France tag along with the American experiment on the global stage. They don't have the leverage that America has to this very day. Britain and France are not in a position to out-leverage America's foreign affairs or take command of the 3 permanent members status. So you got America with impunity as a veto hegemonic demonic world sole superpower ambitions of delusions when it comes to constant politics and paganisms of constitutions under the derangement of George Washington adornment with manifest destiny. America thinks that it's destined into the ends of days, into the second coming of God, that we will rule over the world. It's said in the Christian American Bible that we are picked out by God to rule with manifest destiny. That's what these politicians, Christians, deranged politicians in Washington think when they warped religion to serve their hypocritical oaths as delusioned, self-service, self-grandizing politicians. When they warp the sense of reality on the world stage to grandstand as political figureheads. So you start to see that the world is turning. And every world member states within our globe of this planet Earth yearns to be free. Every country wants their place, equal place, to represent their sovereign citizens of their populations of their sovereign states at that table as permanent members. But you got this one nation trying to impede it all. which is the United States of America. So whether y'all like it, Washingtonian hypocrites of when y'all take your hypocritical oaths and y'all grandstands on the world stage emulating Rome, when y'all realize that the world is moving on and y'all can't do nothing to stop it, your futile attempts will only end up losing every step of the way. When every nation tries to sit at that table and will sit at that table as permanent members with equal voting power, y'all can't do nothing, hypocrites in Washington, when y'all swear yourselves in with the hypocritical oath and that little mount of paganism that y'all call Washington, D.C. Y'all have no powers to stop this movement. So may the League of All Nations, may the United Nations unite together and tell this one nation, the United States of America, to step aside and let all nations on earth be united. Where all nations have the sovereign rights to lead and represent their nations and their populations equally at the world stage of all United Nations within the Permanent Security Council as permanent members. Let all League of Nations and all United Nations stand up unanimously and tell this one nation on earth, America, to step aside and allow all nations to have their permanent place and their equal place in the council as permanent members of the United Nations Security Council.